February 27, 2026. Northern Gulf of Oman. A single Iranian submarine slips out of Bandar-e Jask and disappears into the dark. No one is supposed to see it leave. That's the point. 6 hours later, two P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft and a pair of MH-60R Sea Hawk helicopters from the USS Gonzalez are working an expanding sonar lattice across 340 square nautical miles of open water. They're hunting what appears to be a single Ghadir-class midget submarine, a vessel so small, so quiet, so deliberately placed that most analysts would call its detection a routine ASW success. Most analysts would be wrong. The Ghadir wasn't hiding, it was waiting to be found. And 11 miles to the northwest, sitting motionless in a thermocline pocket at 80 meters, the real weapon was already armed. I'm your host at Defense Beacon. Today we're reconstructing the submarine engagement the URGS will not acknowledge, a 6-hour hunt that ended in 14 minutes, the deliberate bait that nearly worked, and the single 4.2-second acoustic signature that changed everything. 3 questions drive this story. How does a diesel-electric submarine hide from a P-8A Poseidon for 6 consecutive hours? Why did the USS Gonzalez's sonar team initially classify the second contact at? And what's on the sonar tape that only 3 officers at 5th Fleet have heard in full? By the end of this reconstruction, you'll have all 3 answers. But to understand what happened on February 27th, you need to understand what the URGS naval forces had been building toward for the previous 4 months. October 2025. The Strait of Hormuz Tension Index, a composite metric tracked by the Naval War College, derived from AAS transponder gaps, SIGINT collection rates, and Iranian naval exercise tempo, hit its highest reading since 2019. Not because of a single incident, because of a pattern. URG fastboat harassment of commercial shipping had increased 34% compared to the same quarter in 2024. Iranian naval aviation was conducting more frequent overflights of the transit lane. Satellite imagery from mid-October showed unusual activity at the Bandar-e Jask submarine facility, specifically extended berthing periods for at least 2 of Iran's 3 operational Kilo-class submarines, suggesting maintenance cycles that didn't align with normal rotation schedules. The Kilo-class. That designation matters enormously to what follows. Iran operates 3 Project 877 EKM submarines purchased from Russia in the 1990s, the Tariq, the Noor, the Yunus, each displacing approximately 2,350 tons, each capable of sustained speeds of 17 knots underwater, with an operational diving depth of 240, each armed with 6 503mm torpedo tubes, capable of firing the 5365K wake-homing torpedo, a weapon with a range of 19 kilometers and a 307-kilogram warhead that homes on a ship's propeller wake. The 5365K is not a precision weapon in the Western sense. It doesn't need to be. A destroyer displacing 9,000 tons, hit amidships by a 307-kilogram warhead, is a mission kill at minimum. More likely it sinks. 5th Fleet knew all of this. What 5th Fleet did not know, what no intelligence product produced between October 2025 and the morning of February 27th had adequately flagged, was that the URG had spent 4 months rehearsing a specific tactical scenario. A decoy-ambush geometry using the Ghadir-class midget submarine as bait and a Kilo-class as the strike platform. The rehearsal was conducted in the waters east of Qeshm Island, far enough from the primary transit lanes that P-8A coverage was intermittent. The Iranians had mapped the thermocline layer structure in the northern Gulf of Oman across multiple seasonal cycles. They knew where the temperature gradients created acoustic shadow zones, areas where sonar performance degrades sharply because sound bends away from the surface layer. At 80 meters in the northern Gulf of Oman in late February, a Kilo-class submarine running on battery power with its coolant pumps in low cycle mode produces a radiated noise signature that a standard dive-for sonobuoy at 200 meters altitude will detect roughly 12% of the time during a routine ping cycle. Not 0, but close enough that a fatigued sonar operator working hour 5 of a 6-hour patrol might call it biologics and move on. That was the plan. The USS Gonzalez, an Arleigh Burke-class flight II-guided missile destroyer, commissioned in 2001, homeported at Naval Station Rota, Spain, forward deployed 5th Fleet's area of responsibility since January 6, 2026, was the primary surface ASW asset in the northern Gulf of Oman on February 27. Commanding officer, Captain Marcus Webb, a surface warfare officer with previous ASW qualification tours and a reputation at 5th Fleet for methodical thinking rather than aggressive impulse. Webb's ship had been operating in the area for 52 days. His crew knew the water. His sonar technicians had logged more hours in the northern Gulf of Oman thermocline environment than any other surface crew in 5th Fleet at that moment. That experience would prove critical, but it would also create a specific vulnerability the URGS had anticipated. Familiarity breeds pattern recognition, and pattern recognition, when a threat deliberately conforms to the expected pattern, can become a trap. ZO 411 local. The Ghadir departs Bandar-e Jask on a bearing of approximately a 95 degree. It immediately goes to silent running, battery power, minimum crew movement, no active sonar, speed 3 knots. At that speed, a Ghadir-class produces a radiated noise level low enough to challenge even the ANKS-22 airborne low-frequency sonar system carried by the MH-60R Sea Hawk. Not undetectable marginal. The Ghadir's mission profile was simple in concept, demanding in execution. Transit to a pre-designated operating area approximately 40 nautical miles south-southwest of Bandar-e Jask cover. Allow itself to be detected. Behave like a submarine that believes it is hidden, but isn't quite good enough. Draw the ASW assets. And above all, hold position long enough for the Tariq to achieve firing geometry on the Gonzalez. One detail about this plan that I kept coming back to in the after-action assessments. The Ghadir crew knew exactly what they were doing. They knew they were the bait. The officers aboard that submarine understood that the longer they maintained the deception, the longer they kept the P-8As and Sea Hawks focused on them, the more exposed their own vessel became. They were buying time with their own safety. That takes a specific kind of discipline. The Ghadir itself is worth understanding precisely, because its physical characteristics are inseparable from why the deception held as long as it did. The Ghadir-class is Iran's indigenous midget submarine design, developed through a combination of North Korean technical assistance and domestic IRGC engineering, displacing approximately 120 tons submerged, roughly 29 meters in length, crewed by between 14 and 18 personnel depending on the mission profile. Its propulsion is a single electric motor drawing from a lead-acid battery bank. No diesel generator running submerged, no exhaust plume, no thermal signature airborne sensors could exploit. At silent running speeds below 3 knots, the Ghadir's acoustic output is dominated by crew noise and minor hull flex rather than machinery. In the ambient acoustic environment of a commercially active waterway like the northern Gulf of Oman, that signature blends into the background in a way that a full-size submarine simply cannot. The crew aboard the Ghadir that morning numbered 16. Their commanding officer, whose identity has not been released by either Iranian or American authorities, had reportedly conducted the decoy roll rehearsals personally during the Keshem Island training period. He understood the specific behavioral requirements. Hold course, hold depth, do not react to detection, do not increase speed, maintain the profile of a submarine that is trying to hide rather than one executing a coordinated operation. Every instinct a submarine commander develops over years of training runs against that kind of passivity. The training required to suppress it, to sit and be hunted while deliberately not running, is a psychological discipline that Western ASW planners had not fully weighted in their threat assessments of the IRG submarine force. Meanwhile, at approximately 3:40 local, the Tariq had already been at 80 meters for 9 hours. Its transit from the last confirmed position, a waypoint approximately 60 nautical miles northeast in Iranian territorial waters, had been made the previous evening, using the approaching darkness and a commercial shipping convoy as acoustic cover. At least 24 large displacement merchant vessels were transiting the northern Gulf of Oman that night on AAS trackable routes. The Tariq moved in their acoustic shadow, its 2,350-ton hull masked by the broadband noise signature of tanker traffic. It worked. No P-8A sonobuoy pattern flagged the Tariq's transit, no surface ship radar or sonar detected the move. By the time the February 27th ASW patrol began, the Tariq was already in position. 253-65 torpedoes loaded in tubes 1 and 3. Firing solution continuously updated using passive sonar tracking of the Gonzalez propeller signature. Target, the destroyer's port quarter. The geometry was nearly perfect. The Gonzalez was operating in an east-west search pattern, approximately 12 nautical miles south of the Tariq's position. At standard destroyer speeds, the Tariq's commanding officer, believed to be a senior IRG Navy officer with over 15 years of submarine experience, calculated that the Gonzalez would pass within optimal torpedo range within 90 to 120 minutes of the Ghadir's expected detection. The plan required the Ghadir to maintain acoustic deception for approximately 2 hours after initial P-8A detection. Hold the pattern, keep the ASW assets occupied. Let the Gonzalez's crew believe they were handling a single manageable threat. At 0547 local, the lead P-8A, bureau number 16951, call sign Poseidon 11, operating out of Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, detected the Ghadir on its ANSEP-10 surface search radar, followed 12 minutes later by passive acoustic confirmation from a sonobuoy pattern laid at 06 local. The contact was classified. Possible submarine, small diesel electric, bearing consistent with Ghadir-class dimensions. Poseidon 11's tactical coordinator passed the contact report to the Gonzalez at 0614 local. Captain Webb brought his ship to ASW condition and vectored both embarked MH-60R Sea Hawks. Call signs Switch 51 and Switch 52. What happened next is where the plan began to both work and unravel at the same time. Switch 51 deployed its AN2 ALF dipping sonar at 0631 local. First dip, contact confirmed. Ghadir-class submarine, depth estimated at 45 meters, course approximately 200 degrees, speed 2 knots. The contact was cooperative, meaning it was doing exactly what a submarine trying not to be found would do if it had been found. Slow, shallow, consistent heading. At 5th Fleet headquarters in Manama, the watch officer logged the contact as a potential close-quarters submarine intercept and elevated alert status. Standard protocol. But here's what that protocol didn't immediately account for. The Ghadir was moving too slowly. Not suspiciously slowly in a way that triggered an alarm, but slowly enough that a submarine warfare expert reviewing the track in hindsight would flag an anomaly. A Ghadir trying to evade has options. Sprint at 7 knots in short bursts, maneuver, go deeper. This one was doing none of those things. It was holding course and speed with almost mechanical consistency. The question no one asked loudly enough at 0631 local, why isn't it running? The answer was 11 miles to the northwest, and it had been waiting for 9 hours. The Gonzalez's sonar picture at this point showed one submarine, one threat axis. Webb's crew was executing the ASW response exactly as trained, expand the search datum, establish the contact track, prepare for a possible intercept. Everything was by the book. What's most striking about this phase isn't the Iranian tactics. It's the gap in the American sensor picture. The northern Gulf of Oman is not a low surveillance environment. SOSUS-derived capabilities, surface ship sonars, P-8A coverage, helicopter dipping sonar, the layered ASW network of the United States Navy in its primary operating area is extraordinarily capable. And yet a 2,350-ton submarine had been sitting at 80 meters for 9 hours without a single confirmed detection. The thermocline explains most of it. In late February, the temperature gradient in the northern Gulf of Oman creates a sharp acoustic boundary at approximately 65 to 90 meters, the precise depth window that Tariq was exploiting. Sound energy propagating downward from a surface ship's hull-mounted sonar bends sharply at this boundary, ducting away from the submarine rather than toward it. A dipping sonar deployed from a helicopter has better geometry, but only if it dips below the thermocline layer. The standard search pattern for Switch 51 and Switch 52 that morning had them operating at 40-meter dip depths, focused on the confirmed shallow contact. The other factor was acoustic management. A Kilo-class running on battery power with its coolant pumps in low cycle mode is a quiet submarine. Not Virginia-class quiet, not Astute-class quiet, but quiet enough at 9 hours of battery-managed operations, with the additional masking effect of the thermocline, that the probability of detection for any single sonobuoy or dipping sonar pass was comfortably below 15%. The Iranians had done the math. They needed the Tariq to stay hidden for approximately 8 to 10 hours from the moment it reached its firing position. The thermocline gave them those hours. The obstacle the P-8A crews faced in the early search phase wasn't a tactical failure, it was physics. The Gulf of Oman's thermal structure was doing concealment work that the Tariq's crew alone could not have achieved. From an operational standpoint, and this reflects a genuine debate that has since emerged in ASW planning circles, the standard sonobuoy pattern being employed that morning was optimized for the brief threat, a single shallow water Ghadir. It was not optimized for a second deeper contact exploiting thermocline masking. This is not a criticism of Poseidon 11's tactical coordinator. It's a structural observation about how confirmed contacts shape search geometry in ways that create blind spots for unconfirmed ones. At 0658 local, Captain Webb made a decision that reflected exactly this dynamic. He ordered Switch 52 to maintain close prosecution of the Ghadir contact, while tasking Switch 51 to begin an expanded search pattern to the north and northwest, a precautionary measure against the possibility of a second contact that might have been using the Ghadir as a diversion. The after-action record indicates Webb had no specific intelligence suggesting a second submarine. He was applying what surface warfare doctrine calls the second threat principle. When a confirmed contact behaves atypically, assume the atypical behavior serves a purpose that isn't immediately visible. The Ghadir was behaving atypically, Webb noticed. Switch 51 turned northwest at 073 local and began dipping. While Switch 51 extended its search pattern northwest, the atmosphere inside the Gonzalez's Combat Information Center was one of disciplined tension rather than alarm. The CIC, a darkened, display-lit space, roughly the size of a large conference room, packed with consoles, repeater screens, and the constant cross-traffic of sailors between stations, was running at modified general quarters. Every contact track on the large-screen tactical display was annotated, updated, and color-coded. The Ghadir contact designated track CR6 glowed amber on the northern section, possible hostile, positively classified under active prosecution. The space to the northwest was green, empty, clean water. Webb stood at the tactical display for 4 minutes between 0704 and 78 local, watching the track geometry. His operations officer, Lieutenant Commander Alicia Park, later described his posture during that interval as unusually still. Not the characteristic back-and-forth movement of a commanding officer working the CIC floor during an active contact, but the focused stillness of someone doing geometry in their head. Park didn't know what Webb was calculating. Webb didn't share it. He was looking at the distance between the Ghadir's track and the Gonzalez's own projected course line. Asking himself a question no intelligence product had prompted him to ask, what does the water northwest of here look like to a submarine commander who has been watching me for 9 hours? The answer to that question was already being loaded into tubes 1 and 3. At 079 local, during Switch 51's third dip of the expanded pattern, at a depth of 95 meters, approximately 11.2 nautical miles northwest of the Ghadir contact, the ANQS-22 system registered a transient acoustic event lasting 4.2 seconds. The Tariq's coolant pump had cycled, not a full pump activation. A single maintenance cycle lasting less than 5 seconds, triggered automatically by the submarine's thermal management system after 9 hours of low-power operations. The sound was brief, faint embedded in broadband background noise. Under different conditions, a different water depth, a different sea state, a less experienced crew, it might have been logged as biologics and discarded. Switch 51 sonar operator Petty Officer First Class Derek Mohan did not discard it. Mohan had 2,200 hours in the ANQS-22 system. He had worked ASW operations in the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the Mediterranean. He knew the acoustic signature of dolphin pods, whale clicks, snapping shrimp colonies, and the resonant thrum of heavy merchant traffic. What he heard at 079 local fit none of those categories. It lasted 4.2 seconds. But in those 4.2 seconds, the frequency profile included a mechanical harmonic consistent with a low RPM centrifugal pump operating in a constrained metallic enclosure. Mohan had encountered ambiguous transients before, sounds that sat on the edge of the classification threshold, sounds that a less experienced operator might round down to background noise and move past. His standard practice in those situations was to isolate the narrowband component, run it against the acoustic library stored in the AQS-22's onboard processing system, and wait for the probability output before calling it either way. He did that at 0710 local. The library match returned 3 candidate categories: biological shrimp colony, confidence 18%; merchant vessel auxiliary machinery noise, confidence 31%; mechanical transient, submarine pump signature, confidence 51%. 51% was not a confirmation. It was barely a plurality. But Mohan had learned early in his career that the acoustic library's confidence scores were calibrated against average signal quality. And this signal was not average quality, it was marginal quality, which meant the library was working with degraded input. In his judgment, the actual probability of a submarine source was higher than the number on the screen. He flagged it as a possible mechanical transient, designated it Track Sierra 7, and reported it to the Gonzalez at 071 local. The watch officer in the Gonzalez's Combat Information Center pulled up the acoustic data at 0712 local. The track was weak, depth estimate, approximately 80 meters, position of 2 nautical miles northwest. Course and speed, indeterminate from a single 4.2-second contact. What it was not was a whale. The harmonic structure was wrong for biologics, too regular, too brief, too mechanical. The watch officer called Captain Webb to CIC at 0713 local. Webb looked at the track data for less than 30 seconds. He ordered Switch 51 to redip immediately at the datum, this time at 110 meters, below the thermocline boundary. He elevated the ship's ASW posture to imminent threat, and he began computing a weapons release solution. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface, and yet it's the decision that defined the entire outcome. Webb was working with a single 4.2-second acoustic transient, one possible mechanical contact, and no corroborating intelligence product that specifically placed a Kilo-class submarine at that position. Under normal rules of engagement in a non-active conflict environment, the threshold for weapons release against a submerged contact requires a higher confidence classification than possible mechanical transient. Webb did not yet have that classification. He had 26 minutes, by his own estimate, before the Gonzalez entered the optimal torpedo release window for a submarine at Sierra 7's estimated position. Assuming Sierra 7 was real, assuming it was a Kilo, assuming it had firing solutions loaded. 26 minutes to confirm or dismiss. At 07 Fort local, Switch 51 redipped at 110 meters contact. Immediate and unambiguous. Below the thermocline, the Tariq's acoustic signature opened up in the ANJ-22's display like a file unlocking. The sonar system's narrowband processing identified the hull resonance, the propeller blade rate signature at rest, and the residual coolant pump harmonic. The AI-assisted classification system returned a probability assessment in 8.3 seconds. Kilo-class submarine. Confidence, 94%. Depths, course, approximately 340 degrees. Speed, less than 1 knot. Approximate position, a nautical miles northwest of the Gonzalez. Switch 51 reported the classification to the Gonzalez at a 7:15 local. Webb transmitted a contact report to 5th Fleet at 0716 local. Classification: confirmed hostile submarine, Kilo-class bearing northwest, weapons posture unknown, potential threat to the Gonzalez. The rules of engagement for 5th Fleet naval forces operating in the northern Gulf of Oman in February 2026, under the operational framework established following Iranian naval harassment escalation in late 2025, authorized a commanding officer to employ lethal force against a confirmed submerged submarine contact if the commanding officers assessed an imminent threat to his vessel and could not otherwise neutralize it. Webb assessed imminent threat at 0717 local. The dilemma he faced was real and compressed. He had a confirmed Kilo-class submarine at 80 meters, armed with 5365K wakecombing torpedoes, in a firing position relative to his ship. He did not know whether the Tariq had already launched. Wakecombing torpedoes travel at 45 knots. At 11 nautical miles, impact would occur in approximately 15 minutes of torpedo run time. If the Tariq had fired before Mohan heard the coolant pump cycle, the weapons were already in the water. He also did not know with certainty whether the submarine had hostile intent. A submarine at 80 meters in a thermocline layer in the northern Gulf of Oman is not inherently an act of war. The Tariq had made no aggressive maneuver, had not gone to weapons away, had not transmitted on tactical communications frequencies. What it had done was position itself in an optimal attack geometry relative to the Gonzalez, remain undetected for 9 hours in coordination with a decoy submarine, and operate in battery silent mode consistent with pre-attack posture. Webb made his call. At 0719 local, he authorized Switch 51 to employ a Mk-54 Mod 1 lightweight torpedo against the Tariq. The Mk-54 is worth understanding precisely because of what it is and what it isn't. Weighing 608 pounds, 106 inches in length, powered by a seawater-activated silver oxide aluminum battery driving a contra-rotating propeller system to a speed of approximately 40 knots, the Mk-54 carries a 96.8-pound PBXN-103 high-explosive shaped charge warhead and employs an active-passive acoustic homing system derived from the Mk-50 torpedo program. Its maximum operational depth exceeds at 200 feet. Its run-on distance is approximately 50 meters. Its target detection and classification logic can discriminate between submarine and non-submarine contacts in thermocline environments, specifically because it was designed to prosecute contacts in exactly the layered acoustic conditions present in the northern Gulf of Oman. Switch 51 released the Mk-54 at 721 local from an altitude of approximately 50 feet, 1.8 nautical miles from the datum. The torpedo entered the water at 0714 local, active homing initiated. The weapon accelerated to attack speed, crossed the thermocline boundary depth, and acquired the Tariq at approximately 0725 local. The Tariq's crew heard it. Acoustic recordings recovered from the Gonzalez's hull sensors captured a brief burst of high-speed propulsion noise from the submarine's direction, consistent with a crash start of the main drive motor in an emergency evasion attempt. The Tariq went to approximately 7 knots and turned hard to port. It was not enough. At the ranges and depth differentials involved, a Kilo-class submarine generating emergency propulsion power from a depleted battery bank after 9 hours of silent operations cannot outrun a Mk-54 in active homing mode. The moments inside the Tariq during those final minutes are not documented in any declassified record, but the physics are precise enough that the experience can be reconstructed with reasonable accuracy. When the Mk-54's active sonar pings began registering inside the Tariq's hull, a rhythmic, accelerating sequence of high-frequency pulses that every submarine crew member is trained to recognize as terminal homing, the commanding officer would have had perhaps 90 seconds to make a final decision. Launch the torpedoes, which at that point would be a gesture of revenge rather than tactical purpose. Attempt a radical depth change, diving below 79 meters to exploit any remaining bottom bounce geometry. Or continue the evasion run and hope the weapon lost track. None of those options were viable. The battery bank, after 9 hours of drain, could not sustain 7 knots for more than 4 or 5 minutes. The depth beneath the Tariq's keel in that position of the northern Gulf of Oman was approximately 140 meters, insufficient margin for a meaningful dive below current depth. And the Mk-54, once inside 500 meters of an acquired contact, does not lose track. The crew of 32 had approximately 4 minutes from weapon acquisition to detonation. Detonation occurred at 07:35 local, depth approximately 87 meters. The Gonzalez's hull sensors registered the seismic event as a single high-magnitude underwater explosion followed by secondary detonations, consistent with a torpedo warhead initiating a submarine's internal fuel and compressed air systems. The Tariq was on the bottom in less than 4 minutes from detonation. The entire engagement, from Switch 51's initial classification of Sierra 7 to detonation, had taken 14 minutes. At 07:46 local, 11 minutes after the Gonzalez registered the Tariq's loss, the Ghadir surfaced at periscope depth approximately 41 nautical miles southwest of Bandar-e Jask. The submarine's commanding officer transmitted a surrender signal on the International Maritime Distress Frequency. The bait had outlived the trap. The surface recovery of the Ghadir was conducted by the Gonzalez and a Coast Guard law enforcement detachment team operating with the destroyer as part of a counter-narcotics tasking. The physical condition of the vessel, when it surfaced, told a story beyond what the acoustic record had captured. The hull showed minor corrosion streaks consistent with extended submerged operations. The crew, when they emerged into the pre-dawn light of the Gulf of Oman, were physically depleted, gaunt from caloric restriction during the extended mission, some showing signs of carbon dioxide buildup consistent with extended silent running without full ventilation. The Ghadir's air regeneration system had been operating at minimum capacity throughout the 6-hour decoy phase, a further sacrifice the crew had made to maintain acoustic silence. Several crew members required immediate medical attention aboard the Gonzalez before they could be interviewed. The commanding officer, according to accounts provided in background briefings, was brought to the destroyer's bridge after receiving medical clearance. He did not ask about the Gonzalez. He did not ask about his own fate. The first question he asked, through a Farsi interpreter, was about the Tariq. The answer he received, that the Tariq had been destroyed, that there were no survivors, required no translation. The Ghadir's commander had understood the outcome the moment his vessel surfaced and found itself alone on an empty sea, with no radio traffic from the northwest and no secondary explosion sequence that would have indicated the Gonzalez had been hit. He had known the Tariq was gone before he surfaced anyway. The aftermath of the February 27th engagement began accumulating complications almost immediately. To be direct about the controversial dimension of this outcome, the decision to employ lethal force against the Tariq was tactically sound and legally defensible under the rules of engagement in effect. But it was a decision made on the basis of a single acoustic contact lasting 4.2 seconds, a classification confidence of 94%, which means a 6% probability of misclassification, and a commanding officer's assessment of imminent threat that was not independently confirmed by a second ASW platform before the weapon was released. That 6% matters, not because the classification was wrong, it wasn't, but because the decision architecture that permitted a weapon's release on that confidence threshold, in a non-declared conflict environment, against a sovereign nation's naval vessel in international waters, is a threshold that will be litigated in diplomatic and legal contexts for years. Here's the take that will get some pushback. The real failure in this engagement was not tactical. It was intelligence. 4 months of elevated IRGC naval activity in the northern Gulf of Oman, satellite imagery showing unusual Kilo-class berthing patterns at Bandar-e Jask, an Iranian submarine force known to have acquired thermocline-exploitation doctrine from Russian training programs, and no intelligence product prior to February 27th had specifically flagged the decoy-ambush scenario as an active threat. That gap is on the intelligence community, not on Captain Webb. Webb worked with what he had. The system that should have given him more didn't. What do you think? Should the rules of engagement threshold for weapons release against a submerged contact require independent platform corroboration before employment? Or does the time pressure of a potential torpedo threat make that standard operationally impossible? Drop your answer in the comments. The diplomatic consequences began within hours of the engagement becoming public. Iran's foreign ministry issued a statement at approximately 14 local on February 27th, describing the destruction of the Tariq as an act of unprovoked aggression against a sovereign Iranian naval vessel operating in international waters. The statement did not acknowledge the Ghadir's role as a decoy. It did not acknowledge the Tariq's weapons loadout or its positioning relative to the Gonzalez. It presented a version of events in which an Iranian submarine conducting a routine patrol had been attacked without warning by American forces. That version was factually incomplete. It was also politically effective in certain diplomatic contexts. Russia, which supplied the Kilo-class submarines to Iran in the 1990s and has maintained a training relationship with Iranian submarine crews, issued a statement expressing deep concern over the escalatory nature of the engagement and calling for an independent international investigation. China's foreign ministry made similar noises. The UN Security Council session convened on March 2nd dissolved without resolution after the United States and United Kingdom vetoed the proposed independent investigation language. At Fifth Fleet headquarters in Manama, the after-action review process began on February 28th. The classified after-action report, portions of which have since been described in background briefings to selected congressional staff, identified three systemic issues. First, the standard sonobuoy pattern employed by Poseidon 11 in the early search phases was not optimized for a second deep contact exploiting thermocline masking. The after-action review recommended modification of ASW search doctrine for the Gulf of Oman operational environment to include mandatory below thermocline dipping sonar passes at regular intervals, regardless of the confirmed contact picture. Second, the time pressure created by the Gonzalez's track relative to the Tariq's position meant that Webb had less than 30 minutes from Sierra 7's initial classification to weapons release authorization. The after-action review noted this window was insufficient for command-level consultation above the ship. The Fifth Fleet commander did not personally authorize the weapons release. Webb made that call alone, within his ROE authority. Third, the Ghadir's surrender, while militarily convenient, created an immediate intelligence and legal problem. Iran demanded the vessel's immediate return. The United States held the submarine and its crew for 11 days before releasing them to an intermediary in a diplomatic arrangement that has not been fully disclosed. What intelligence was gained from the interrogations conducted during those 11 days remains classified at a level higher than the engagement itself. The interrogations deserve a moment of examination, even at the level of detail that's available. The Ghadir's crew of 16 were separated into individual debriefing sessions within 12 hours of their transfer from the Gonzalez to a secure facility whose location has not been publicly identified. The sessions were conducted by Defense Intelligence Agency personnel with Arabic and Farsi language capability, in coordination with naval intelligence, and according to one background briefing, representatives of at least one allied intelligence service. The approach was not coercive. The Ghadir's crew were classified as detained military personnel rather than unlawful combatants, which placed their treatment under a specific legal framework that constrained the interrogation methodology. What the sessions produced in terms of tactical intelligence was described in the briefing materials as significant and actionable regarding IRGC submarine force structure and doctrine. The specifics have not emerged in any declassified or leaked form. What has emerged is that the debriefers found the Ghadir's commanding officer cooperative regarding operational planning details once he was informed, apparently for the first time, and apparently not through official IRGC channels, about the full extent of the Tariq's loss, including the lack of survivors. Prior to that disclosure, he had provided minimal information. After it, the debriefing tempo increased substantially. One detail in the after-action materials that stuck with me, among the items recovered from the Ghadir before its release, was a laminated operational chart showing the thermocline layer depth data for the northern Gulf of Oman across 12 months of seasonal variation. The chart was produced in 2024. Its coordinate grid and formatting were consistent with materials from a specific Russian hydrographic institute that has provided training support to the IRGC Navy. The Iranians didn't develop this doctrine independently. Someone helped them build it. That thread, who provided the thermocline data, who helped refine the decoy-ambush geometry, what the training relationship looks like between Russian submarine advisors and IRGC naval forces is not closed. Congressional staff who received the classified briefing have since requested additional reporting on the advisory relationship. As of the date of this reconstruction, that reporting has not been provided. The Tariq's loss is the first confirmed destruction of an Iranian naval vessel by American forces since the tanker war operations of the late 1980s. That fact alone makes February 27th a historical inflection point regardless of what comes next. But what comes next is precisely what remains uncertain. Iran's submarine force was already strained before February 27th. The Noor is assessed as being in long-term maintenance. The Yuns has an uncertain operational status. With the Tariq on the bottom of the northern Gulf of Oman at approximately 87 meters, Iran's Kilo-class fleet is for practical purposes neutralized as an operational asset in the near term. The IRGC has neither the indigenous maintenance capability nor the accessible external support, given international sanctions regimes, to rapidly replace what the Mk-54 destroyed. This creates a strategic problem that the IRGC military command is now navigating. The decoy ambush operation was conceived as a demonstration of capability, a proof that Iranian submarine forces could threaten American surface assets in their own operational backyard. It ended instead as a demonstration of the opposite, that American ASW capabilities, even with the intelligence gaps and thermocline complications that defined February 27th, can find and eliminate Iranian submarine threats before they successfully execute. The Ghadir crew still at sea, and there are several, now operate with the knowledge that their primary deep-water strike asset is gone. That knowledge changes behavior. It changes the willingness to conduct sustained submerged operations near American surface groups. It changes the IRGC's calculus in the strait in ways that Iranian military planners will spend the next year trying to recalibrate. Whether they recalibrate toward restraint or toward asymmetric escalation is the open question February 27th leaves unanswered. The 32 crew members of the Tariq have no voice in that question now. Here's what this engagement tells us about the current state of undersea warfare in contested littoral environments. The technological advantage gap between American ASW capabilities and Iranian submarine forces is real and significant. But that gap does not eliminate threat. A sophisticated adversary with accurate hydrographic data, disciplined acoustic management, and a willingness to sacrifice one asset to threaten another can still construct engagement geometries that genuinely endanger American surface ships. The Tariq was 14 minutes from potentially launching on the Gonzalez. If Petty Officer Mohan had called Sierra 7 biologics at 079 local, a call any experienced sonar operator might have made given the signal quality, those 14 minutes would not have existed. Comment trap if you think the Iranian decoy operation came closer to succeeding than the official account suggests. Or hunt if you think the American ASW network had this covered from the start. What remains at 87 meters in the northern Gulf of Oman is more than a sunken submarine. It's a data point in a longer argument about how far Iranian strategic ambition has outrun Iranian tactical capability, and about what happens when those two measures converge. The Ghadir's crew were repatriated, the Tariq's crew were not. The sonar tape, all of it, not the 4.2-second fragment that entered the public record, remains classified above top secret at 5th Fleet. Only 3 officers in the entire naval establishment have heard the full recording. What's on the rest of that tape, no one outside that circle is saying, but the sea remembers everything it takes. If you want to go deeper on the strategic dynamics of undersea warfare in the Persian Gulf, the IRGC's remaining asymmetric naval capabilities, the role of Russian advisory support in Iranian naval doctrine, and what the loss of the Tariq means for the Strait of Hormuz balance of power going into the second half of 2026, that's the next reconstruction we're building. Subscribe to Defense Beacon so you don't miss it.